Hey, Elliot, how you doing today?
I'm good. And yourself?
I'm good. A lot going on in an area that I thought we could spend a couple of minutes talking about is one that's sort of tried and true in financial crime. That's corruption, but there seems to be a domestic and a global focus that we haven't seen in quite a while.
Yeah, I agree. I saw that the White House came out with a statement a couple days ago related to some things, some of which has been in the news with Vice President Harris in Central America. And then the UN had an announcement. So did you saw the White House announcement, I assume?
Yeah, what was interesting, so the White House released what they call a background press call. So you don't know who's on the call. It's kind of interesting, actually. I've actually never really looked at these sort of press briefings before. And this was before the vice president or when she was en route to Guatemala, which we'll mention in a second. But what I thought was interesting is they actually highlighted the Corporate Transparency Act, talking to reporters how it's important to make changes under U.S. law, and that they said that the law that was, as we talked about quite a bit, that was signed in early January, directs Treasury to create that beneficial ownership registry. So they mentioned that. They talked about creating a series of internal government-wide task forces. There's a kleptocracy asset recovery initiative at DOJ that actually has been around for a couple of years, but they're sort of adding more to that. So I thought that was particularly interesting. And then, as you point out, the vice president was in Guatemala, and they did two things of note that I wanted to flag. One was sort of based on that press briefing, DOJ and state is creating an anti-corruption task force that's going to include U.S. prosecutors, law enforcement experts, to investigate and prosecute corruption cases that have a nexus in the U.S., Guatemala, and the whole region. And again, building off that kleptocracy initiative to prosecute these cases, they're going to add what they call resident legal advisors to help with training and mentoring to the public ministry in Guatemala. What they're calling a rapid response team to deploy U.S. prosecutors to enhance that mentorship. That was one thing. It's sort of separate from that and not corruption-based specifically is a human smuggling and trafficking task force, which obviously we've covered that issue quite a bit. Same thing, right? Justice and state with others working with law enforcement to track migrant smuggling and human trafficking operations and share information and enforcement. So, and I know, again, you highlighted what the UN is doing, which the timing wasn't a coincidence, I'm sure.
No, I'm sure not. So the UN is going to have a special session, which at least has been described in a couple places as the first of its kind, and the focus is going to be on corruption, both from a political stability perspective and from an international economic perspective, and it's interesting because, again, it's one of those things that we're seeing some traction, not just in the U.S. with our own foreign policy and foreign affairs efforts, and not just at the UN, but early last month, you and I had a chat about some new efforts in the UK
Right.
that are focused on corruption. I think there's a renewed recognition, not that people weren't aware of it, of the pervasive nature of the problem, but also the insidious nature of the problem, that it creates both economic and political instability. And while not all human smuggling and trafficking is the result of corruption, there's often a tie-in. And so I certainly see it as a positive that people are paying attention and trying to do things. Now, will that mean that, we're going to be able to plant a flag and declare victory in 3 or 4 years? I don't think so. But if we can keep it from getting worse and over time make it better with these coordinated efforts and thoughtful efforts and long-term efforts, I think that will be a huge positive.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add, this was particularly interesting. It came out of the press briefing with the senior administrative official, which they don't disclose who that was. Is they highlighted when they talked about the anti-corruption efforts, they highlighted the importance of investigative journalism and investigative NGOs. So I think that's pretty interesting. You never would have seen that under the previous administration. Chance, but it says here basically sometimes to deal with support of anti-corruption efforts, they say it boils down to foreign assistance. So giving funding to groups that in some cases jumpstart investigatory journalism organizations. That to me is interesting, and that is giving a pat on the back to those journalists that have done so much in our world in financial crime, whether it's looking at shell companies, tax evasion, or corruption. So the fact that the U.S. government highlighting that, especially now when journalism is under fire, I thought was particularly noteworthy.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I mean, there's just it takes some focus, and it takes some political courage by all of the participants to really say, this isn't right, and we're actually going to put our actions where our values are.
Yeah. So going forward, we at RightSource, we're going to be doing a webinar on June 24th on corruption, which will include one of our presenters is Tom Cardamone, who's with Global Financial Integrity, an advocacy group that does exactly what the administration has highlighted, as well as other experts that will be part of that. So that'll be something that we'll be tracking, not just at the webinar, but going forward. I think corruption is going to be at the end of 2021. When we talk about financial crime, I think one of the bullet points is going to be anti-corruption. I don't think there's any question.
Agreed. All right. You have a great weekend, and I will talk with you next week.
Take care. Stay safe.
Yep, you too. Bye-bye.